It was 6:15 in the morning when Anwar unlocked the glass doors of a building that didn't even have his name on the entry list. He pushed the heavy door open, his old broom scraping the marble floor as he stepped in. The company was called Glairtech International, one of the biggest logistics firms in the city, a place filled with people in suits, expensive perfumes, and eyes that never met his. Every morning he arrived before the sun came up, and every night he left long after the last employee had gone home. No one noticed him. No one even asked his name. To them he was just the cleaner. But what no one knew, not even Anwar himself, was that every sweep of his broom across that shiny marble was actually polishing his own company floor. He didn't know it yet, but he wasn't working for Glairtech. He was Glairtech. Anwar's story didn't begin here. It began 27 years ago in a small town where he and his wife built a life out of nothing. Back then he had a modest delivery business, just 3 vans and a dream. He named it after his newborn daughter, Rena Logistics. He wanted to leave her something one day, something that would carry her name even if he couldn't. But fate had a cruel sense of humor. When Rena was 6, his wife died in a road accident while delivering a parcel for his company. After that day, everything fell apart. The debts piled up, his trucks were taken, and he was forced to sell the company to a man named Rahman, a wealthy investor who promised to keep the business running and offered Anwar a small job as a warehouse supervisor. Rahman changed the company's name within a year. It became Glairtech International. Anwar didn't know what shares or equity meant. He didn't realize that Rahman had kept 49% of the business in Anwar's name as a form of insurance deal that was never properly filed. To Anwar, it was all gone: his business, his dream, his wife, everything. He just wanted to survive. Years passed. He grew older, quieter, and invisible. He took smaller jobs over time, until eventually he was cleaning the same building where executives now made millions from the empire he once started. He never questioned the irony. He thought this was life's way of reminding him of his place. That morning, as he polished the glass doors, a new CEO was arriving. A young man in his 30s, elegant, confident, with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. His name was Imran Rahman, the original owner's son. Everyone whispered about how ruthless he was. Anwar didn't care. He just nodded politely when Imran brushed past him, barely noticing the old man's presence. Inside the elevator, Imran's reflection caught something, a glimpse of Anwar's name tag. For a split second his expression changed. But then he looked away. That evening, when the office lights dimmed and only the security guard and Anwar remained, something unusual happened. Anwar found a folder on the floor outside the CEO's room. He picked it up, a habit from years of tidying. It was labeled Company Share Distribution Confidential. He didn't mean to look. But one line, written in bold black letters, caught his tired eyes. Shareholder Anwar Hossein, 49%. He blinked. It didn't make sense. He thought it must be another Anwar. There were thousands of Anwars in the city. But the ID number, it was his. His old national ID, the one he'd used when signing those papers decades ago. His heart started pounding. The document felt heavy, almost unreal in his trembling hands. He couldn't breathe for a moment. Was it a mistake? A cruel joke? Or something else entirely? He put the folder back where he found it, his hands shaking. All night the thought kept haunting him. He didn't tell anyone. Who would believe a cleaner claiming to own half a company? He barely slept. By dawn, his head was buzzing with questions he couldn't answer. The next morning when he arrived, the CEO was already there. It was unusual. Imran rarely came before 10. But today he was sitting at the lobby cafe, sipping coffee and scrolling through his tablet. When he saw Anwar, he smiled politely. "Good morning," Imran said, as if testing the sound of those words. Anwar nodded and went about his work. Then Imran spoke again. "You've been here a long time, haven't you?" "Yes, sir," Anwar replied softly, "more than 10 years." Imran's gaze lingered on him for a moment, then drifted back to his screen. "Loyalty," he murmured, "is rare these days." Anwar didn't know what to say. He just kept cleaning, trying to steady his thoughts. But something about Imran's tone, almost nostalgic, made his stomach twist. That day in the boardroom, Imran brought up an unusual topic. He asked the finance head, "Has anyone ever audited our shareholder registry?" The accountant looked puzzled. "It's been years, sir, everything's stable." Imran's lips curved. "Do it again." By the end of the week, whispers started spreading. A missing shareholder had been found. Someone whose name had existed in the system but had been marked inactive for decades. Nobody outside the board knew who it was. Except Imran. Anwar continued working, unaware that his name was being discussed in meetings filled with suits and silent tension. The board wanted to erase him quietly. Imran, however, had other plans. Late one night after everyone left, Imran called the head of legal. "Find him," he said, "but don't tell him who we are. I want to meet him first." The next morning, Anwar was sweeping the lobby when a man in a black suit approached him. "Mr. Hossain." "Yes." "Could you come with me? The CEO would like a word." Anwar froze. He couldn't remember the last time anyone from management had wanted a word with him. He followed the man upstairs, his heart racing with confusion and fear. In the top-floor office, Imran looked up from his desk. "Please sit," he said, gesturing to the chair across from him. Anwar hesitated, clutching his cap in his hands. "You've been with this company a long time," Imran said calmly. "Thank you for your service." Anwar nodded silently. "I wanted to ask," Imran continued, "do you remember Reena Logistics?" Anwar's breath caught in his chest. He looked up sharply. "How do you know that name?" Imran leaned back. "My father told me about it, said he bought a small company years ago from a man who lost everything after an accident. That man was you, wasn't it?" Anwar stared at him, speechless. His throat felt dry. "Yes, that was me." Imran's expression softened, almost with pity. "My father always said you were a good man, honest, hardworking." Anwar's eyes glistened. "He was kind to give me a job, I never forgot that." Imran nodded slowly. "Yes, he was kind." Then his tone changed, quieter, heavier. "But there's something you should know, Mr. Hossain, something my father never told you." He reached into a drawer and slid a file across the desk. It was the same folder Anwar had seen that night. The same document that had stolen his sleep. "These are your shares," Imran said, 49% in your name, still valid, still active." The world seemed to tilt for a moment. Anwar blinked at the papers, unable to process the words. I don't understand," he stammered. "You don't need to understand right now," Imran said gently, "but you need to know this company wouldn't exist without you. Everything here began with your hands." Anwar sat there trembling. His whole life, all the humiliation, the silent years, the pain flashed before his eyes. He had cleaned the very floors he owned. He had bowed to people who worked for him. And now he was being told the truth too late for it to matter. Tears welled up in his eyes. "I don't want anything," he whispered, just let me keep my job." Imran studied him silently. Then he smiled faintly, a strange mix of admiration and calculation. "Of course," he said, "you'll keep your job." But something in his voice was off. Too smooth. Too careful. When Anwar left the office, Imran turned to the window, watching him disappear into the lobby below. He dialed a number on his phone. "Prepare the documents," he said. "We can't let this go public. If he claims ownership, the entire board will collapse. I want him taken care of." The voice on the other end hesitated. "What do you mean, sir?" Imran's eyes darkened. "Legally, quietly, I don't care how, just make sure he signs it away." That night, Anwar walked home with a strange heaviness in his chest. For the first time in years, he felt something that scared him: hope. He wanted to believe Imran was being honest. He wanted to think maybe life was finally giving him back what it had taken. But deep down, something felt wrong. A few days later, a lawyer showed up at his small rented room. "Mr. Hossain," the man said politely, handing him a set of papers. "It's a formality, just some old company records that need your signature to clear the system." Anwar looked at the papers. They were thick, filled with words he didn't understand. He turned a few pages and saw the name Glairtech International. His hands trembled. "Is this for my shares?" he asked quietly. The lawyer smiled. "Oh no, sir, just an old document to help the company keep running smoothly." Anwar hesitated. Something in his gut told him not to sign. But the man's smile was so calm, so assuring. And after all, what harm could it do? Still, his pen hovered over the paper, unmoving. Then he said softly, "Can I show this to someone first?" The lawyer's expression flickered just for a second. "Of course," he said too quickly, "but we'd prefer it signed today." Anwar nodded slowly. He didn't sign. That night he sat in his small kitchen, staring at the papers. He couldn't read half the words. But one thing he could see clearly, the line that said transfer of ownership. He felt his heart sink. Imran wasn't helping him. He was taking everything again. And this time, Anwar wouldn't let it happen. The next morning, before dawn, he walked to the one person he knew he could still trust, an old friend named Kabir who had once worked as an accountant before losing his job. Kabir read through the documents for over an hour. Then he looked up, his face pale. "Anwar, if you had signed this, you would have lost everything, again." Anwar stared at him, disbelief and rage mixing in his chest. Kabir continued, "This document gives the company full rights over your shares permanently. They wanted you to give up your ownership voluntarily. You'd be left with nothing." Anwar's hands clenched. He had been poor all his life. But he wouldn't be fooled again. Not this time. "Can you help me?" he asked quietly. Kabir nodded. "I can, but if we do this they'll come after you, they won't let you walk away." Anwar looked down at his rough, calloused hands, the same hands that had built trucks, cleaned offices, and buried his dreams. Then he looked up. "I've already survived worse," he said, "let them come." That night, as the city slept, Imran received a message from his legal head. "Sir, he didn't sign." Imran's jaw tightened. "Then it's time we make sure he does." And somewhere in a dimly lit apartment, Anwar hid the documents under his bed, unaware that the storm had just begun. The next morning, Anwar noticed two men waiting by the gate of his apartment building. They weren't dressed like office people, dark shirts, sunglasses, the kind of quiet that makes your chest tighten before your brain even knows why. One of them nodded as Anwar passed. "Mr. Hossain," he said politely, "the CEO asked us to drive you to the office today." Anwar stopped. "The office?" "Yes, sir, Mr. Imran wants to discuss something urgent." Anwar hesitated, clutching the strap of his old canvas bag. Everything in him screamed not to go. But refusing could make things worse. He forced a weak smile. "All right," he said softly. The car ride was silent. The men didn't talk, didn't look at him. Outside, the city blurred by, each streetlight flashing across Anwar's anxious face. He thought of the file hidden under his bed, of Kabir's warning. He tried to calm himself, maybe it was nothing. Maybe Imran just wanted to talk. When they reached the building, Imran was already waiting in his glass-walled office. The sunlight poured in behind him, outlining his silhouette like a figure carved from light and lies. "Mr. Hossain," he said warmly, "please sit." Anwar obeyed, his hands folded tightly in his lap. Imran smiled, the kind of smile that's meant to look friendly but doesn't reach the eyes. "I heard you didn't sign the papers." Anwar swallowed. "I wanted to understand them first." "Of course," Imran said, still smiling. "That's fair, it's just those papers are part of a restructuring process. We're modernizing everything. Old records, old files, it's all a mess, we just need to tidy things up." He leaned forward slightly. "You trust me, don't you?" Anwar met his eyes. He wanted to say yes. But all he could manage was silence. Imran sighed, tapping his pen. "You've been here for over a decade, everyone respects you, you've earned that, but these documents, they're not important to you. You're a good man, Anwar, you don't need this kind of stress." Anwar looked down, his voice barely above a whisper. "Sir, I lost everything once because I didn't understand papers like these. I can't do that again." For the first time, the smile left Imran's face. His tone hardened, precise. "You're a cleaner, Mr. Hossain, that's what you do, you clean, leave the business to people who understand it." The words sliced through the air. Anwar stared at him, not in anger but in quiet disbelief. He stood up slowly. "I'll think about it," he said. Imran didn't stop him. But as Anwar turned to leave, Imran said, almost casually, "You should, before someone else does." Outside the door, the men in black were waiting again. Anwar walked past them without a word, his legs trembling. That night he went straight to Kabir's place. Kabir was already waiting, worried. They brought you in, didn't they? Anwar nodded. He wants me to sign. Kabir exhaled sharply. We have to move fast. If those shares are still legally yours, you could challenge the board. Anwar frowned. How? By proving ownership. I'll need your old documents, anything from Rena Logistics, receipts, registrations, anything with your name. Anwar searched through his old trunk, yellowed papers, faded photographs, memories covered in dust. And there it was, a weathered brown envelope marked Rena Logistics 1998. Inside were registration forms, tax receipts, even an old newspaper clipping announcing the business launch. Kabir smiled faintly. This is gold. We can take this to a journalist I know. She exposes corporate fraud. Anwar hesitated. You think we should make this public? Kabir looked at him seriously. It's your only protection. Once it's in the public eye, they can't bury you quietly. They agreed to meet the journalist the next morning. But the next morning never came the way they planned. When Anwar reached Kabir's small apartment, the door was open. Inside, papers were scattered everywhere. The table was overturned, the window cracked. And Kabir was gone. Panic surged through Anwar's chest. He called out his friend's name, searching every corner, but the place was empty. On the floor, beneath the mess, he found one thing, a single sheet of paper with a note scribbled on it in Kabir's handwriting. They know. His hands shook. He stuffed the note into his pocket and ran. That night he didn't go home. He wandered the city streets, afraid, exhausted, lost. He thought of his daughter Rena. She lived abroad now, barely called anymore. He'd always told her he was fine, that he worked at a small office. He never told her about the pain, the loneliness, the humiliation. And now, he didn't know if he'd live long enough to explain anything. The next day, as he tried to sneak into work unnoticed, the security guard stopped him. Mr. Hossain, he said awkwardly, the CEO said you're on leave, you can't enter today. Leave, Anwar repeated, I didn't take any leave. I'm sorry, sir, orders from above. Anwar stepped back, the weight of realization crushing his chest. They were cutting him out piece by piece. That evening, while sitting in a small roadside tea stall, a stranger sat beside him. You shouldn't go home tonight, the man said quietly. Anwar turned startled. Who are you? The man didn't answer, he just slipped a small envelope across the table and walked away. Inside was a flash drive and a note that said, play this only when you're alone. That night in an internet cafe, Anwar inserted the drive into an old computer. A video file appeared. He clicked it. On screen was Imran, sitting in the same office talking to someone off camera. Make sure the old man doesn't show up again, Imran's voice said coldly. Once the transfer is signed, we'll claim he was delusional, the board won't ask questions. Anwar stared at the screen, his heart pounding. So it was true. Everything. He leaned back in his chair, tears welling in his tired eyes. All his life, he had believed that working hard and staying honest was enough. But the world didn't care about honesty. It only cared about power. He closed the laptop slowly. Then with a steady hand, he pocketed the flash drive. The next morning, he returned to Glaretech. This time, he didn't bring his broom. He walked straight through the lobby, ignoring the stares of the security guards who didn't dare stop him. He went up to the boardroom, where Imran and several directors were in a meeting. When the doors opened, every head turned. Mr. Hossain, one of them said, surprised. Imran's expression froze. What are you doing here? Anwar placed the flash drive on the table. I came to clean, he said quietly, not your floors, your lies. Imran's jaw tightened. Security, he barked. But before anyone could move, Anwar clicked the remote control for the projector on the wall. The video began to play. Imran's own voice echoed through the boardroom. Make sure the old man doesn't show up again. Silence fell. No one moved. The directors exchanged shocked glances. Imran's face went pale. Anwar turned toward him. You tried to steal my life once, not again. Imran stood abruptly. You think this changes anything? You're nothing, you're a cleaner. Anwar's voice was calm, almost soft. Maybe, but I own half this company, and I have proof. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the old envelope. the registration papers from Rena Logistics. He placed them on the table beside the flash drive. The directors began murmuring among themselves. One of them picked up the papers, scanning them quickly. This can't be fabricated," he whispered. "The signatures match, the registration ID is the same." Imran's composure cracked. He tried to speak, but his voice trembled. "This is a misunderstanding." "No," interrupted one of the senior board members. "It's fraud and it's over." Anwar turned to leave. He didn't want to see Imran's face anymore. He just wanted real air. As he walked out of the boardroom, the murmurs grew louder behind him. Security guards rushed past. The walls that once felt like a prison now echoed with freedom. But just as he reached the lobby, someone called his name. He turned. It was Imran, breathless, desperate. "You think you've won?" Imran hissed. "You don't know what this company really is." Anwar frowned. "What do you mean?" Imran stepped closer, his voice trembling with anger. "My father didn't buy your company to save you, he did it to save himself. You think you were the victim, you have no idea what started all this." Anwar stared at him, confused. Imran's words felt like poison. "What are you talking about?" Imran leaned in. "Ask yourself, why did your wife really die that night?" The world froze. Anwar's breath caught. "What did you say?" Imran smirked, eyes glinting with something dark. "She wasn't just delivering a parcel, old man, she was delivering something else. Something my father didn't want the police to find." Anwar's knees went weak. His hands began to shake. "What was in that parcel?" he whispered. Imran's voice was calm, cruel. "You'll find out soon enough if you're brave enough to open the past." He walked away, leaving Anwar standing alone in the empty lobby, his heart pounding with a new kind of terror. Because suddenly, the story wasn't about money anymore. It was about the one question he had buried for 27 years, the one that now refused to stay buried. What really killed his wife? Anwar stood in the empty lobby, his heartbeat echoing louder than the ticking clock on the wall. The words kept replaying in his mind, "Ask yourself why your wife really died that night." Every breath felt heavier, as if the air itself had thickened with ghosts. He stumbled outside into the drizzle-soaked street, barely aware of the people rushing past him. For 27 years, he had blamed fate for taking her away. But what if fate had nothing to do with it? What if something had taken her life deliberately? He walked aimlessly until his feet carried him to the old neighborhood, the place he hadn't visited in decades. His small, broken house still stood at the end of the lane, its paint peeling, its windows clouded. Inside, everything smelled of memory, dust, old wood, loneliness. He lit a single bulb, sat on the edge of his bed, and stared at a framed photograph of his wife, Salma. She was smiling in the photo, holding little Rena in her arms. He touched the glass gently. "I thought I lost you to an accident," he whispered, "but now I don't know what I lost you to." He needed answers. And there was only one person left who might know: Rahman, Imran's father. The man who had bought Rena Logistics all those years ago. Anwar hadn't seen him since the sale, hadn't even known if he was still alive. But he remembered hearing someone mention that the old man had retired to a village outside the city. So the next morning, without telling anyone, he left. The journey took 3 hours. The road was narrow, lined with fog and memories. When he reached the old house, a caretaker answered the door. "Mr. Rahman doesn't meet visitors," he said. "Please," Anwar begged, "tell him it's Anwar Hossein from Rena Logistics." The man's eyes widened slightly, and without another word he disappeared inside. Moments later he returned and nodded. "Come in." Rahman was sitting in a chair by the window, wrapped in a blanket. He looked frail, almost transparent, his skin the color of ash. But when he saw Anwar, something flickered in his eyes, recognition, guilt, or maybe both. "Anwar," he said softly, "I was wondering when you'd come." Anwar froze. "You knew I'd come." Rahman sighed. "Imran talks too much." Anwar took a step forward, anger trembling beneath his voice. "What happened the night my wife died, Rahman?" The old man didn't answer right away. He stared out the window, where the fog clung to the trees like secrets refusing to lift. Then he spoke, his voice trembling. "She was delivering a parcel for you, but it wasn't your delivery." Anwar frowned. "What do you mean?" Raman's eyes filled with something close to shame. The truck she drove was carrying one of my shipments, documents and samples that could have destroyed my reputation if exposed. We were under investigation for tax fraud. She was never supposed to see them. Anwar's chest tightened. What was in that parcel? Evidence, Raman whispered. Evidence that I bribed customs officials. Your wife was an honest woman, Anwar. She found out. She called me that evening, said she couldn't be part of something illegal. She was going to report it. Anwar's breath caught. You're saying? Raman closed his eyes. I didn't kill her, but I didn't stop the people who did. The world went silent. Only the sound of rain against the window remained. Anwar stared at him, his throat dry, his hands trembling with rage. She was my wife, he whispered. You let her die. Raman's eyes glistened. I've lived with that guilt every day. I thought giving you the company, even a part of it, would make it right, but it didn't. It never could. Anwar stepped closer, voice shaking. You didn't give me anything, you took everything. Raman didn't argue. He just looked away. I know, he murmured, and now my son has become worse than I ever was. Anwar turned and walked out, his vision blurring with tears. The rain had turned heavier. Each drop felt like it was washing away what little peace he had left. He had come looking for truth. But truth was a cruel thing. It didn't free him, it crushed him. That night he sat by the river where his wife's funeral had been held years ago. He stared at the black water and whispered her name. I'm sorry I couldn't protect you. I'm sorry I believed the lies. I'm sorry for everything. He took the flash drive from his pocket, the one with Imran's confession. He held it tightly in his hand, unsure what to do. Expose the company. Destroy everything he'd built with his own hands. Or walk away and finally find peace. But peace was never meant for people like him. The next morning, news broke across every screen in the city. Glairtech CEO under investigation for corporate fraud and attempted coercion. Anonymous sources had leaked the video and the documents. Imran was arrested. The board was in chaos. And everyone was asking who sent the evidence. No one knew. Not even Anwar. Because he hadn't leaked it. Someone else had. Later that week, he received an unmarked envelope under his door. Inside was a note. You started this company with honesty, let it end with truth. And below it, a single letter K. Kabir. Anwar's heart clenched. His old friend was alive. He smiled faintly for the first time in years. Maybe, just maybe, things were finally ending the way they should. But peace once again was short-lived. 2 nights later, a fire broke out at his building. The neighbors said it started from the ground floor. By the time firefighters arrived, the flames had devoured everything. Anwar's room gone. The trunk with his wife's photograph gone. The only thing they found was a half-melted name tag that read, Anwar Hossain. No one could find him. Some said he'd perished in the fire. Others whispered that he'd vanished before the flames began. A week later, a man in tattered clothes walked into the ruins of Glairtech headquarters, the building now sealed and lifeless. He wore an old worker's uniform, his face shadowed by a cap. He moved slowly, almost reverently, running his fingers along the walls as if feeling the ghosts of his own life. He reached the lobby, where the glass still bore faint soot marks from the fire's reflection. He knelt down, took out a small framed photo from his pocket, his wife's, and placed it gently on the floor. This was always yours, he whispered. Then he stood up and walked away, disappearing into the rain before anyone could notice him. Months passed. Imran was convicted, sentenced to years in prison. Raman died quietly in his sleep, his wealth scattered by lawsuits and debts. Glairtech was dissolved, its assets sold to cover penalties. No one ever came forward to claim the 49% shares still legally under the name Anwar Hossain. The government declared the shareholder deceased. The papers said he died in the fire. But in a remote coastal town far away. A man who looked very much like him lived in a small house near the sea. He worked at the docks, fixing nets for fishermen, never speaking much, always alone. He had no ID, no history, no past, only a name the locals never asked for. Every evening he sat by the shore watching the sunset. Sometimes he would hum an old tune, a lullaby his wife used to sing. And when the wind was just right, it carried that sound far across the water like a prayer that refused to fade. Years later, when Rena, now a grown woman, returned to the city, she visited what was left of Glairtech's building. It had been turned into a community center. On one of the walls there was a plaque with the words, "In memory of those who built with honesty and lost everything to greed." Below it were two names. Anwar Hassin. Salma Hassin. Rena stood there for a long time, tears tracing silent paths down her cheeks. She had received an anonymous letter months before, no address, no sender, only a few words written in trembling handwriting. "Forgive me, I kept your mother's promise, I kept her name alive." She never knew who sent it. But that night when she looked up at the stars, she felt something, a presence, warm and distant like her father's quiet eyes watching over her one last time. And somewhere by the sea, a tired old man watched the same stars, whispering her name like a prayer. "Rena." He closed his eyes, and for the first time in his life, the silence didn't feel empty. It felt peaceful. The tide washed closer, kissing the sand where his feet rested. He thought of his wife's laughter, his daughter's smile, the sound of the broom sweeping across marble floors that were once his own. He had spent a lifetime cleaning other people's mess, and in the end, he had cleaned his own soul. When the sun rose the next morning, his chair was empty. Only the photograph remained resting on the armrest, a faint smile frozen in time. And beside it, written in shaky pen on the wooden rail, "Some truths are too heavy for the living, so I'll take mine with me." The waves erased the words slowly, grain by grain, until nothing was left but the sound of the sea whispering softly like forgiveness.